Hey you guys, I am back finally. I'm outside here in what I call my Gypsy Cove, and I'm at the Tiki Bar, and I'm just sitting here having myself a little drink that I made for myself. And yeah, I wanted to apologize to you guys because, I started the intro with Roulette with Michelle Suzette, and then the episodes are She Is Me, and I kind of got behind because of the fact that some of you guys already know. I had went and ordered online a chemical peel for my arms and my hands because I've had skin cancer, and I have a problem with it. I've got a lot of cancer scars on my arms and my hands, so I thought, I'll get this and I'm going to go ahead and do it and just see if it makes it look a little bit better, And yeah, as I said, some of you guys know the whole episode as to what happened, and it was horrific, and it burned my arms so bad. I had them wrapped up for about a week and a half, actually. They burned pretty damn bad, and I will never do that again. Don't ever do that. We order things, off the internet, but let me tell you what, if anybody's ever thinking of doing something like that at home, don't do that. I know better. I already know better to do that. And the thing about it is that I ordered it, and so, I had time to think about it. It wasn't like a purchase that I didn't think about. So this was planned, and so I ordered it. It took a couple weeks to get here, and when it got here, I knew that I was going to do this to my hands and my arms and try it out, and it was just not good. Anyway, aside from all that, as I said, some of you guys already know about that, but it was a real serious burns. And then on top of that, my backyard has been a disaster with all of this construction and having concrete poured and a new pool house built, and just everything. And it took so much longer than expected because of the heat, and then you got people that have the holiday weekends and they can't just take a weekend, they got to take a week camping, and leave my backyard destroyed. And so anyway, I'm going to quit complaining, but I'm telling you, it's been a disaster. But I do finally have my Gypsy Cove all done. As you guys can kind of see a little bit right there, how I've got my little Gypsy Cove going on. And, the pool side isn't quite finished, but, by the time we get it done, summer's going to be over. But I'm looking forward to next summer for sure, because I know that it'll all be done and it'll be great. And it's just too bad we couldn't have gotten a head start on this before so much of summer passed by, so, but in Oregon, that's the weather that you're going to get. It's literally like, a switch goes on. It goes from cold to all of a sudden it goes to hot, and it's just a switch, on and off, on and off. It's crazy. Anyway, I did notice, and here I just said, again, the intro video that I did, I noticed that I said a lot of ums, and then I also said a lot of and so until you see yourself on video doing a video, you don't realize these things. It was funny. And so I know that the first part of the video, the volume was down. It was kind of hard for everybody to hear. So hopefully out here it should be better, and everything should work out better this time. So I literally have my little notes, and I'm old school. If I don't have my glasses and my notes on paper where I can see everything instead of me trying to look on my phone with all the notes and check out my phone and read to you guys of my notes that I want to talk to you about, it'll be a mess. So that fan is blowing on me. Anyway, it feels good. Feels really good. So anyway, yeah, I've got all my notes down on paper, like the old lady that I am. And now it is time for me to put on my glasses so I can actually see my notes. Anyway, so I did want to tell you guys that, I do not want to do these episodes of She Is Me and make it all sad and drab and, dreary and just about sad stuff, because, I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor. And that's it, but I gotta, tell you guys all about everything. So I don't want you guys to think it's always going to be sad and drab and, I don't want to, go tune in to Roulette with Michelle Suzette, because it could be sad. But exactly, roulette. You never know what you're going to get. So here we go. I do have to start out a little bit boring, because if I don't tell you guys everything in detail from the past, literally starting from my grandparents, then you guys won't understand everything else that goes along, with what I'm telling you guys. So again, I want to make sure that I cover all these things, because I'm really hoping that there's people out there that I can reach and that they will understand, hey, you're not alone. These things happen to other people. You are not the only person that this is happening to. These things really do happen. And then there's other people out there that are saying things like, my God, I never even dreamed these kind of things happen. Well, they do. And there's people that have had it a hell of a lot worse than I have. So, it's going to be interesting, but I do have to start from the very beginning so that you guys understand, the trauma, the abuse, the drug addiction, the just all of the addictions and the trauma, and where it all began. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with where it all began. My grandparents, Naomi is my grandmother. She had 5 children. Now, she was married to my grandfather, Melvin. And to make a really long story short with just this part, they were married. My grandmother actually got sick, and she had she had tuberculosis, and she had to go into one of the, tuberculosis hospitals, and she was in there for a very long time. And also my grandfather, on my grandfather's side, they served, they were military people, and he was in the war, and he came out of the war, and he was pretty messed up, shell shock, they used Agent Orange on him, I mean, all kinds of stuff, so when my grandfather came back, he was not all there. Now, this is only what I've heard from my mother and my aunts, and it's passed down to me. So, with my grandfather being so messed up from the war, he came back to, an oldest son. They're all still little. And then the 4 daughters. And it's really sad because they were all little. And he came back, and he was the type of person that would expect them to, you couldn't drop a crumb on the floor, or you couldn't make a mess. And if things were so bad, I mean, he'd beat their butts with the belt. And sometimes he would, my aunts might come in, my older aunts might come in and kind of tell me, if there's some things that I don't have exactly right from years ago, back then, and just what's been told to me. But I was told that my grandfather was so abusive at that point that he would literally, if my mom, didn't get her times tables right or wasn't learning how to tell time, that he would beat her in the head with a belt, and beat her with a belt buckle in the head. That he would threaten, and I'm not sure if he did this literally physically, but he would threaten that he was going to make them lick the corners of the floor if the floor was not mopped well enough and clean enough to make sure that it was clean. So again, I'm not too sure about that. My aunts will watch this, and they'll give me their feedback on that. So when my when my grandmother, she had gotten tuberculosis, and she had to go into the tuberculosis wards. From what I was told, my grandfather actually, he hitchhiked from one end of the United States clear over to the other end of the United States with all these itty bitty little kids trailing behind him. And they were eating at like the soup kitchens, and things like that, these little tiny kids. So he went to war and he served for our country, and he came back and he wasn't being taken care of. He wasn't all there. And he wasn't really able to hold down a job because he did have all the kids, and because he was messed up. And it's just really sad because he didn't get benefits or anything. I don't know why at that time. So they were broke. He went and served and came back to a bunch of little kids, and his wife, with tuberculosis in the tuberculosis ward, and him having to take care of these little kids. And then there were no benefits or anything for him at all. And so it's really sad, that he had no way to pay the bills or anything. So yeah, they ended up walking all the way across the United States, hitchhiking. And so when my grandmother did get out of the tuberculosis ward, she had gotten out, and they had gotten back together, and things seemed to be okay. But somehow, in the mix, they ended up getting a divorce. And my mom, I have one aunt. The one aunt was pretty close to my grandfather after the divorce and things like that. I'm going to move this chair over just a little bit because I seem to have a straw poking right up out of the top of my head. Anyway, so my older aunt, my one aunt, she was pretty close with my grandfather still. But for some reason, the relationship between the rest of the kids kind of just fell to the wayside, because I don't remember my mother having a whole lot of good things to say about my real biological grandfather. And so, it is what it is. There's just not a whole lot there. We did go to Texas one time when I was 15 years old, Corpus Christi in Houston, Texas, to visit him. And, we'll talk about that down the road, but that was something. But other than that, I really don't know a whole lot about him. But I can say that, they got divorced. My grandmother ended up marrying her second husband, and he was an Italian man. And they were from Chicago. I was born on the south side of Chicago, Cook County. And so they were from Chicago. My grandmother married my grandfather, my step-grandfather, and he was the Italian. And my biological grandfather, our last name was Baldwin. And so this grandfather, the second grandfather, he was Moriello. So with him, it's kind of one of those relationships which there's others in our family that should have just probably never, ever, ever happened. So my grandmother had her children, and he did not have any children. No stepchildren, no biological children or anything at that point when they got together and they got married. So what happened is, as I said, they were in Vegas, or excuse me, not Vegas. We moved to Vegas later. Chicago, south side of Chicago, and there was the Playboy Club there, the Hugh Hefner, Playboy Club. And they both worked there. Hold on just a second. I gotta have me a little drink. Check it out, guys. I got me a little piece of watermelon. I got me a little piece of pineapple in there. And, yeah, we're doing it up tonight. It is party time. It is the time to get this done. So I'm going to be partying with myself a little bit while I'm doing episodes of She Is Me. So anyway, south side of Chicago, Playboy Club. They both worked there. The step-grandfather, I'm just going to call him Moriello. He was the doorman. He was the bouncer, and he was the doorman, and they did know Hugh Hefner. And my grandmother she had this beautiful, because my aunts tell me about this, but my grandmother was a beautiful woman. She had this long, beautiful red ponytail, and she would put on her her fish net stocking nylons, and her little outfit and everything. And she would go to work, and she was not a Playboy bunny, but she was like a server and a hat check girl, and so she waited tables and things like that. So she did it up. She had the outfit. She was beautiful, and they were kind of a power couple at that point. And yeah, they were something. He was a very handsome man back at that time, and she was a very, very, very beautiful woman. And she wore her high heels every day, and I mean, she was a smoking hot lady. So, and I have to tell you, I kid you not, I'm not just saying this because this is my family, but my grandmother's daughters, every single one of them were gorgeous, drop dead gorgeous. And I know this because it's not only just me saying this, it's because everybody, in our lives always said, my God, these women are gorgeous. So anyway, so with that, they worked there, and moving on with Chicago, I got to tell you a little bit about some of the things that my mom and her sisters would tell me about their childhood in the south side of Chicago. Now, it's completely, we're talking city life. And these little girls, they would, get on the train, ride all over at night, all by themselves. Everybody was working, so these little girls were out doing whatever the heck they wanted, wherever they wanted. So they were all over the place all the time, and they would get on these, trains and just go traveling all over the place. These little tiny little girls all by themselves, going here, going there, checking this out, checking that out. And they even told me about things like, the buildings are so close and tall there that they would jump from roof to roof to roof. And there'd be this little skinny, between, and they could have fall down, break their neck, and anything. I mean, just wild. There's no supervision. Wild, these kids. And there were, from what they told me, there were these, I guess they were called, they had like, sort of like apartment complexes, but each floor. And again, my aunts will come in and tell me again if I've gotten something not quite right. They'll say, "Oh, well, you didn't know this, or you didn't know that, or maybe you don't remember this, or maybe you didn't remember that, or actually it went like this." So this kind of stuff before me, they'll help me out with. I'm going by what I know, what they've told me, as close as I can get it, and from what I remember. So there were these, like I said, kind of like these apartment complexes that are real close together, and they had these levels that I think were called flats, and they were on one floor. They were all these little apartments. I'm assuming like little kitchenettes, or maybe 1 or 2 bedrooms or something like that. And there was one bathroom, like a community little bathroom, that everyone would share. My God, I can't imagine that. I'm a complete germaphobe. I'm a germaphobe. I cannot deal with that. I couldn't imagine having to share, a bathtub or a shower or a toilet or anything with other people. So, I guess there were a lot of sponge baths in their own little private place and their little apartments and stuff, but my God, I can't imagine. And then to think about, you could get locked in there with weirdos, so to think about that, I mean, that's pretty damn scary, because I've raised 5 kids. And I can't imagine having to go through that with my girls. I mean, really. So that'd be terrifying. So anyway, it was definitely something. So on top of that, my aunts told me that they would go to get on these trains I was talking about, and they would go to these other places across town and everything, to the same exact kind of, I'm gonna just call them hotels, or apartment buildings. And they would go to those other people's bathrooms, and they would like lock the doors and hang out in there all night and kind of camp out in there all night. And they'd, at least, they'd lock the doors. They knew to lock the doors. But yeah, but now these little girls were some, you don't want to mess with these little girls. They weren't, they weren't the normal little girls. They could stick up for themselves, and they were wild and everything, but still in all, they were little girls, so moving on. My mother has always been, I'm just going to say, known as a savage, because I don't know what else to say. I don't know how else to explain it, except for that my mother was a savage. So, she got pregnant with me when she was 19. She gave birth to me when she was 20. She passed away at the age of 58, really young. And I'm 54. So, that's scary. So anyway, my aunts tell me that my mom was so wild, and that she hung out with some women that were Indians, and they were real good friends of hers. But she told me that, she would, sometimes they'd frequent the bars and stuff, and they'd go in, and this is before me, and they'd go in partying and stuff. And even some of my aunts have said, yeah, we watched her on the outside of these bars when she was partying with her friends and stuff. And she would be in these bars, and she carried a huge machete on the back, on the kind of the back side of her belt. And so she had this gigantic machete, and she would carry it around, and so did her friends. And her friends were so wild that they'd go in, and if the cops came in to try to, calm things down, that didn't go over very well, because from what my aunts tell me, they'd be watching from the windows or from the street sometime, or across the street at the park or down the block or whatever, knowing their sisters in that bar partying, and they'd see the cops go in there, and literally the cops would get their asses whipped and beat by my mom's friends and my mom, and they'd be flying out the door left and right. I mean, so good grief, right? Good grief. So anyway, that's just, some wild stuff. So that's pretty much what I know there. And I do know that one of the reasons why I have got major phobias and fears of rats is because of the stories that they have told me about the rats in Chicago and how big they are. Oh my God. They're as big as cats, from what I've been told. And my mom told me, and some of my aunts, that they were so wicked, these rats were so wicked that literally, if you were walking across it, they'd like jump at you, out in the streets of Chicago and down the alleys and things like that. And in those apartment buildings, in the hallways and stuff. And so I'm thinking, oh my God. So as soon as my mom would tell me that, hell yeah, they'll jump on your legs, they'll jump on you, they'll jump. I have had a massive, horrific fear of rats ever since then, because I'm afraid that they're going to jump on me, and they're going to, come at my face, or come at my neck, or come at my legs or something as I'm going by and bite me, and I get rabies or something. I don't know, but it is what it is. But I know that that's where my fear and literally phobia of rats came from, is from them telling me about the rat days of Chicago. Holy shit. They'd even say that, they were on the trains, that they'd be on the damn trains, that they would ride all over the place. And I'm just like, damn, that's a little too much for me. Rats scare me. So anyway, so that's pretty much all that I know about Chicago, really. Except for the fact that my aunts were pretty much the only white kids in school. Everybody else was pretty much, they were either Indian or African American. I don't know how the Indians, but that's what they told me. So anyway, they they had a hard time. They learned to stick up for themselves. That's for sure. But yeah, they were kind of the only white kids in school, and on the south side of Chicago, and they had a rough time. But you know what? They were psycho enough to make it. Those kids, I mean, they made it. It's psycho in a good way. I guess if you let everybody know you're a nut, they'll leave you alone. So then my step grandfather and my grandmother decided, there's a couple different stories on why they decided to leave Chicago. They're not really important, so I'm not going to go there, but I've heard a couple different stories. Regardless, they ended up moving to Las Vegas together and working in the casinos, and they worked in the casinos there for years and years. And then as my aunts started growing up, they also worked in the casinos. My uncle worked in the casinos. I mean, that's what they did there. That's the money to be made. So anyway, I'm gonna get on my glasses now and see a little bit of my notes to make sure that I've not forgotten anything. Give me a minute, guys. Give me a minute. Okay. I do want to tell you guys this, though. My mother told me, remember I told you she was wild? My mother told me that I was one of the kids, toddlers, that was at Woodstock. She was a big music lover. My whole family loves music. I love music. Everybody's loved music. We've known a lot of, musicians, and later I'll tell you about how, some of, like Ike and Tina Turner's drummer used to come to our house, and how I don't, three more. Okay, sorry about that. I don't have proof, but my family knows, but it doesn't really matter. But the Rolling Stones used to come and do illegal activity with my stepfather and my mother, and party. I mean, it is what it is. So I went to Woodstock. I was a Woodstock baby, and I was a naked little toddler running around all over in Woodstock. And can you imagine being a naked kid running around Woodstock? She said I went through the mudslides and everything. Oh God, me being a germaphobe. How filthy, how dirty. Oh. Anyway, hey, I made it. I don't know how the hell I made it, but I did. Okay? Can you imagine the crap that could have, might have, did have, my God, that could have happened as I was a toddler running around at Woodstock that I don't know about, and that I'll never know about, and maybe she knew about, and maybe she didn't know about. Ah, good grief. It's cool, though. It's cool to know that I was a kid at Woodstock. It really is. A little bit scary, but it's pretty cool. I mean, I have to say I've never met anybody else that was at Woodstock, or a baby at Woodstock, So, I mean, that's pretty cool if you think about that. Yeah, so I'm going to go on ahead and put my glasses on, and we're going to start talking about the first memories that I have in Las Vegas. And like I said, you guys, I don't mean to bore you with all of this, but if I don't tell you guys the stuff from the past where it all started, it won't make sense where I'm going with all of this down the road later, So I think you need to know where it all started. So hopefully you won't be too bored out of your mind until, I get to some more stuff that's quite a bit crazier. But I'm telling you what, that damn straw behind my head, if it's not bugging the hell out of you guys, it is bugging the hell out of me. I hope it's not taking your attention away from what I'm saying, because it's like boop, 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 boop. Anyway, Focus. All right, here we go. So my first memory in Las Vegas was with my mother and her boyfriend named Larry Brooks. Larry Brooks Larry was also my biological father's name. She seemed to like Larry's. Anyway, my first memory was of Larry Brooks. We lived in a little teeny tiny pink house, and I'm telling you, I was 3 years old, and I can remember this. We lived in a little tiny pink house. I remember I had my favorite onesie pajamas that my mom would put on me and button up, and there's actually a picture of me in those onesie pajamas. They're dark kind of navy blue pajamas, and I'm sitting in a rocking chair. And it was just really weird to run across that picture, and that being the time of my first memories in Vegas. So my third birthday in that house, I remember having a Cinderella cake. I remember what it looked like. And I remember that there was an album, an actual vinyl album, with the cover of Cher. And there was a song, "You Better Sit Down, Kids, I'm telling you why." That song, for some reason, I loved that song. As I grew up and I listened to the lyrics of that song, it's a sad song because it's talking about a mom telling her kids how they're going to divorce, but I think because my mother looked so much like Cher, and and then I looked a lot kind of like Chastain, Bono. So looking at my mom and me looked a lot like Cher and her daughter back at the time. So when I'd see pictures or album covers or something of that, I think it reminded me of us. Maybe I thought it was us, I don't know. But I remember that song. I remember that album playing a lot. So my mom really liked that back at that time. So on my third birthday, I remember that is one of my first memories of things getting really, really violent and dysfunctional. So remember now, my mom could hold her own and some, but that night, my mom and him fist fought, and he drug her by the hair of her head through the living room on the carpet, shag carpet, long shag carpet, and she had rug burns all up and down her legs, and she beat the crap out of him, and he beat the crap out of her. And that was the last memory of my third birthday. And I just remember being so afraid and so upset, just so distraught. It was awful. It was awful to see your mom when you're that little, just get her ass beat, basically. And it was hard because it's not like she didn't fight. So it wasn't just a quick little knockdown, boom, she's down on the ground and it's over. It wasn't. It was a pretty hardcore fight. It lasted a long time. So, anyway, now in the intro, so we're moving on from Larry number one. That's all I remember about him. He wasn't important. So what I do want to tell you, so I see that I've been on here a little bit over 30 minutes to kind of catch you guys up, kind of recap, catch you up. I was going to just do about 30 minutes so I didn't bore you guys, but because it took me so long to kind of catch you guys up, I'm going to keep going. And if you guys need to, maybe pause the video and watch it, in 3, 4, 5 increments or whatever, then it is what it is. So I'm going to keep going for maybe about 30 more minutes. This one will be probably about an hour, if not close to it. So in the intro, I explained how my biological father's family are real gypsies, and my grandfather was from Romania, and my grandmother was she was American, but she was from English gypsies, and they were Irish and English. So I believe that's where I get the skin, the fair skin. I wish I would have gotten a little bit darker skin so I didn't get sunburnt and all the time and have to deal with skin cancer and so on and so forth. All right, so I went back and forth to when, as I said, my mother was 19 when she had me. They were in Chicago when she met my biological father, the gypsy. I was born there, and when my mom went with her family eventually to Vegas, he stayed. My biological father stayed. And the reason why, one of the reasons why, is because my mother insisted that, see, she was young. She thought he would change his ways for her and for me. And they were considered modern gypsies back at that time. But they still very much did not believe in going to school like past junior high school at the very most. So you quit school and you went to work. And so my mom wasn't going to go for that. And she said no. Yeah, my family calls me Shelly. They don't really call me Michelle. So they said that when you hear me say Shelly, that's me. So my mom said, no, you're not gonna not have Shelly go to school. She has to get an education. She has to know how to read and write and add. Well, they could read and write and add, but it was, she wanted more from me than that. And so she left, and she said, I'm not into the gypsy traditions. Now let me tell you, the parties and all the functions and everything, all I remember is lots of color, a lot of gold, a lot of silver, a lot of color, a lot of just, I don't know, I guess you guys, some people would call it tacky, but oh gosh, yeah, look at the yeah, anyway, I just remember a lot of gold, and I remember a lot of flashy, and I remember a lot of colors, and it's not like they didn't have nice things. They did. I mean, these parties and these gatherings and holidays and stuff, I remember them. They were just massive, and there were just tons of people everywhere. So it was a big thing, and that was great. I mean, I remember all that, and that was some fun stuff. That was great. But when it came to like the education and the things about the tradition that weren't going to be so great for me, my mom just said, hey, I'm not going for this. If you're not willing to change your ways, then this isn't going to work out. So she told me that she agreed that I would be able to visit them for the summer, but that I would have to go be with her in Vegas and go to school, right, during the winter. And then in the summer, she would get a break from me and let me go see my family, because I did love them. They were good to me. They weren't bad people. They were great people. A little criminal-minded, but who wasn't? They were all criminal-minded on each side, so it didn't matter. Almost all criminal-minded. I don't want my aunts mad at me. Almost. So when she moved to Vegas with me, they supposedly had an agreement. And the agreement just was not working out, to make a really long story short. Now, I remember there was one time when my mother did allow me to go on a plane. I was 4 years old, to go see my father and his parents. She didn't bother telling them. I had my first little dog. Her name was Tiffany. She was a little peach colored doggy. She didn't bother to tell them that I was bringing my dog along with me. Thank goodness, when we were, you got to remember, these are days of no cell phones and stuff, landlines, and if you miss the call, you miss the call. So I'm getting off the plane, I'm meeting my family, and we're walking through the airport, and there's crates, of dogs sitting there. And I look over and I'm like, there's Tiffany, my dog. And I remember them saying, that's not your dog? What are you talking about? What are you doing? That's not your dog. And I said, yes, it is. And so my grandmother went over and she read the tag and she said, well, I'll be damned. It is her dog. Here we go. Well, they weren't interested in having a dog. They didn't plan on having a damn dog. I mean, can you imagine? So my poor dog, she came along. Well, at my grandparents' house, they had their own little dog. I think she was like a Chihuahua, or she was a very heavy Chihuahua. And she her name was Bubbles. Bubbles. And so as soon as I got there, Tiffany and Bubbles, two females, of course, they were having it out, having it out. Well, at one point, I don't know how much time went by, but at one point, I went somewhere and came back home, and there was no more Tiffany. Tiffany was gone, and I don't know what happened to her. And so, that was awful. That was her. I mean, she was there 1 minute and then gone the next, and I never knew what happened to her. So later on, and see, this is how crappy, that's why if my mom was still here, I would tell her, this was wrong, I wasn't a perfect parent. I'm still not a perfect parent. There is no perfect parent, but I'm telling you what, this kind of stuff did need to be said. She said that my grandfather on my gypsy side was so ruthless and so vicious and so mob style, in not a good way at times, which I never witnessed that myself. Well, except for one time. I never witnessed that at that point when my dog was missing up to that point. So when I finally did, end up coming back home years later, my mom says, yeah, he probably took that dog out to the backyard and knocked it in the head with a hammer and killed it. Because he didn't want it there because he was a jerk, and that's kind of an asshole that he was. He was just hardcore like that. And I'm like, what? So she could have been exaggerating because, they did have a dog. And I do remember the dog being cute, Bubbles, and taken care of. So I hope that did not happen. I really, really do. But the fact that she said that it did to me, I just thought, wow. And now I know that years later, she was saying those kind of things, not realizing what it did to me, but trying to make me believe or know how crappy they could be. My father's family, right? That way I don't ask about them. I don't want to have anything to do with them. I don't want to be around them, So anyway, yeah. I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about Tiffany and Bubbles. So let's move forward. And remember the ums that I said I was saying? I really got to stop that. And the okay, so at another time, when they supposedly had, my mother and my biological father supposedly had this agreement, my mom started when I did finally come back from that visit. There were a couple visits. They had come from Chicago to California, and I visited there, and in Vegas, and I visited there. So it was not too many times that plan that they had made, where I was going to see them, have visits. It wasn't too long. It was only 3 visits that I remember before things started going south. And what happened was my mom started saying, telling the family, they're travelers. They will, at some point, they'll take her. They'll take her, and they've got different aliases and different names and things like that. And how the hell am I going to find her if they take her on one of these visits and we're arguing or fighting or not agreeing with something and we never see her again? What will I do? So my mom started backstepping on her plans, right? Well, that did not go well. So next thing I know, the Gypsy family, when my mom lived on the north side of Chicago, owned her own little home, there was a knock at the door, and I was 4 years old still. There was a knock at the door. My mom answers the door. I'm in the living room now. At this time, my mom was still very young, very beautiful. I didn't see a lot of crazy stuff going on. I wasn't totally traumatized or anything like that. She, for her, she had it together. She was doing very well. And so when she opened up the door, what I remember is my grandfather and my father and a bunch of other people with them that I didn't recognize or knew. They came in, they rushed my mother because my mother was not going through with the plans. I don't know how long it had been since I'd seen them or what exactly happened. She wasn't going through with the plans, and they attacked her. They beat her ass to the ground. My grandfather, I remember he had these boots, and he kicked her in her head. He kicked her in the side of her head, and he broke her eardrum, and he busted her head up pretty good. And my father was, because you got to think, they're, who knows what they were told. They think they're fighting to keep me alive. You know, she's got other boyfriends, you know, involved. I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to make excuses for their behavior. I don't know. But I do know that there was a lot of them, and it was just me and my mom, and they were all against my mom. And I remember them literally playing tug-of-war with me, physically playing tug-of-war with me. She was yanking, they were yanking, she was fighting like crazy, and there were so many of them. They were making sure there was nobody else in the house, and that it was just her and I, and she was dealing with my biological father and my grandfather. And as I said, grandfather kicked her head in, my dad roughed her up. They were playing tug-of-war with me physically, and my mom later on said the reason why she let go is because she started hearing kind of like my bones kind of cracking and stuff, and she said she was afraid, and I was screaming and crying, so she let go of me because she was afraid. She knew that they had the upper hand, and she was afraid that, you know, I was going to get hurt. They were going to hurt me, not meaning to, but that they were, you know, going to hurt me, so she let me go. So they left with me. Come to find out, she got word that they went from Vegas to California before they went back to Chicago, that they left Vegas to California. Well, my mother got in touch with some bikers that she knew. It was a few weeks later, she knew where they were. A few weeks later, with those bikers, she went in a car with some people, and then some bikers followed. And they went and they watched the house, and they seen me standing outside playing, and in the front yard playing. And I know that she drove up in the car, and I seen her, and she yelled, "Michelle, you know, Shelly, come here, come here." And I looked at my mom, and of course I'm excited to see my mom and that she's okay. And I run to my mom in her arms, and here comes the family. Here comes the family from the house. And it starts all back over again. Now we got all my gypsy family and neighbors, everybody that they know and their people, and then my mom and who's ever in the car, and then a bunch of bikers. And now everybody's fighting. And I mean, there are guns. There are knives, there are fists flying, there are people kicking. I mean, it was insane. Insane. And I remember this at the age of 4, like it was yesterday. And so, yeah. So my mom, again, had to let me go. She didn't want to physically get me hurt. So they were outnumbered as well. My mom and the bikers were outnumbered. So, yeah. This was, that was the last straw before my gypsy family actually did, boom, take off with me without a trail. Without a trail. Now, there's a newspaper clipping that I have. Years ago, when you see the way that, you know, the writers, you know, the publishers would write things in the paper years ago, it's kind of funny because of the way that they wrote the newspaper clipping up of me. You know, they got my face, and they're like, you know, where is baby Michelle? And, you know, she was kidnapped by a modern band of gypsies and not seen again, and the FBI is looking for her, and blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of funny because the way that they described me, and I'll post it sometime, the way that they describe me in this this newspaper article is that And poor Michelle, she has such bad luck. She was, because my mom wasn't married, and back then, boy, that was a big thing. She was a poor little illegitimate frock. It's like reading that thinking, what the hell? Anyway, it was, hey, it was back in 70s, early 70s, 70, 72, 71. So, yeah. It's kind of funny to read that. But, so I remember traveling, and I remember going everywhere with my gypsy family, all over the United States. We would stop everywhere, and everywhere we would go to, like, these little stop-and-go stores or these little gas stations and stuff back then, they had, like, these I guess they were called, like, all around the world, little dolls. You could collect them. They were little dolls. They were like little Ireland dolls, little USA dolls. They were all these little different dolls. So I had this big doll collection because everywhere we would go, I would have to get one of those dolls. And I remember that. I remember that really distinctly. Just that was the big thing. I couldn't wait. So to get those dolls. So anyway, we traveled all around. I remember traveling to Florida. I loved Florida as a kid. And I still, as you can tell, I live in Oregon, and look at what I have behind me. I still miss the sun, like Vegas, Florida. I still miss the sunny weather. I loved Florida. My gypsy grandparents loved Florida as well, and they ended up basically in their later years staying in Florida. But I remember Florida very, very well, and I loved it. I loved it there. So at some point in traveling, we were in Cleveland, Ohio. And in Cleveland, Ohio is where the FBI came to my grandparents' house. And it was 18 months later that I was on the road traveling here and there and here. They came to my grandparents' house, wherever little place they were staying. A lot of times I remember they would rent storefronts. They were literally like businesses, storefronts with glass storefronts, doors and everything, businesses. And yes, my grandmother told fortunes. And yes, my grandmother had a crystal ball. And yes, people would come and pay my grandmother to do her little hustle. I mean, it's true, they would rent storefronts. And then my father would go out and do auto body work. They did auto body work. And so they did, they had their hustles going. They had money, they did their thing. But, yeah. So Cleveland, Ohio, I'm almost at an hour. Cleveland, Ohio is where the FBI came, and all I remember is the FBI. All I remember is being at my grandparents', and all of a sudden, I remember all the family freaking out. Hider. I was shoveled away into a basement of this complex, and I was pushed behind a washer. And I was told, stay there, by some neighbors and some neighbor friends. Maybe they were extended family, I don't know. But I remember them, I knew them. So my family had me shuffled out of there and put downstairs away. And I just remember being behind this washer, and I just remember thinking, oh, there's spiders and stuff back here. I was like freaked out. I'm like, I don't know what the hell's going on. What's going on? Now, you got to know something. My grandparents, all I remember is them being good to me. My grandmother's name was Laura. My grandfather's name was Frank. And they had, their children's names were my father, Larry, his sister, Teresa, his sister, Ruby, and his brother, Stephen, and his brother, Jimmy. They were all good to me. They were my aunts and uncles, and they were all good to me. I don't have bad memories of these people doing horrible things to me, and I loved my grandmother. She was very good to me. So I have nothing but good memories of them. So as I'm hiding, being shuffled, hiding, I all of a sudden see there's a bunch of men, and they're all dressed in these really, really nice suits, and they're flashing their badges around, and they're coming down, and they're yelling my name, and they're all holding guns, and they're yelling my name, yelling my name. And a lady finally says, I see her. Here she is. I found her. They pull me out. I'm terrified. They say, hey, we're going to take you to your mom. We're going to take you to your mom. As if, I didn't even really want to go with my mom at that point. I love my mom. I miss my mom. But I didn't want these strangers taking me to my mom. I wanted to go back upstairs with my family. I'm like, what the hell, So they took me through the upstairs and down the block, back down to the grandparents' house, the storefront, whatever you want to call it. And I remember all of my family members being there handcuffed, and they all had guns drawn on them. And I remember they couldn't hug me, they couldn't kiss me, they couldn't say goodbye to me, nothing. And I was rushed out down the street with all of this big bunch of people, rushed out down the street to a cop car sitting on the side, parked on the curb. And the back door flies open, and there's this woman that I do not recognize. This does not look like my young, beautiful mother. Okay? I don't know who this woman is. And she says, Shelly. And I look at her, and I'm going, and I'm telling the people, I don't know her. I don't know this lady. No. I want to go with my grandma. I want to go with my grandma. I don't know her. No. And I'm starting to fight. And she starts talking to me, my mother, and she goes, Shelly, it's me. It's me. It's your mom. I heard the voice, and I'm like, this is my mom. Oh my God, I know this voice. I love my mom. I miss my mom. She's coming at me out of the back of a cop car. She swoops me up and she holds me, and she is just sobbing. I mean, sobbing like a sob I've never heard before. I still remember it. And I remember thinking, okay, this is my mom. Okay, we're in a cop car, but why is all this going on? And why does her voice sound familiar, but she doesn't look the same. She looks different. She looks completely different. So I never get to see my family again. I never get to say goodbye to them. I never get to hug them. I never get to kiss them. Nothing. Done. End of story. Never, ever again is there any kind of connection or anything with them ever again. Now, I have taken steps to lightly look for them here and there in the past. I do know that they did end up in Florida, but I do know that they have aliases, and a lot of them don't have actual real Social Security cards from back then. So it's difficult. It's really, really difficult. What I did find out, and what kept me from continuing to find out more, was when I finally did find out some things about my biological father, I started looking at criminal records. Well, I had wrote a letter, and I sent it to the address that I found online, but I was too afraid to send a return address, and so I put the post office here where I live. This was back in 2000. So still, we've come a long way, with electronics. So this was back in 2000. So anyway, when I started looking again, it just so happened to be right around that time, within a few years of each other, from what I found online, is that my grandfather passed away, and not too long after that, my grandmother passed away. So I don't know if he got the letter on top of that. Hey, this is me. Do you recognize me? I'd like to, at least make contact with you guys, kind of see how things were going. Well, I don't know if he ever got that letter or not. So around that time, I looked at his criminal record, and he actually had a criminal record, and so did some of the brothers that were pretty bad. And the criminal record was that he actually went to prison for manslaughter because he was driving drunk down a highway the wrong way, drunk in his vehicle, and he ran into a young couple, a very, very young couple, like early 20s, I believe, a very, very young couple, on this motorcycle and killed them. And so he went to prison for manslaughter, and he killed two people being a drunk driver. And so when I seen that, and so when I seen some of the brothers, kind of criminal records, I put the brakes on, because I said the grandparents are already gone. I see there's some criminal activity here that, I don't want to get into it, but I didn't want to get into that at the time because, as you know, one of the reasons why I'm doing this is to tell you guys about trauma, abuse, drug addiction, and all kinds of abuse, and from, A to Z. And so I had pretty much already been through enough shit, and didn't want to have to, expose myself to possibly many, many family members or a whole nother family that were just all dysfunctional and messed up too, because I'd already been through enough crap from what my stepfather, my mother married my little sister's dad, and her, so because after that all didn't work out with my mom and my dad, my mother did get remarried. And she got remarried while I was gone for those 18 months. And I came back to a 6-month-old little sister. And so, the trauma and everything from the stepfather and my mother and their marriage, oh, good God, no. I just was really pretty much too afraid to even reach out and go there, But I know that aside from my father's siblings, I know that they have had children, and I know that some of them, not everybody's dysfunctional. And back then they were considered modern gypsies, but, the gypsies today, many of them have, they are more modern gypsies, honestly. They do live, not all of them are travelers, and not all of them, do not have homes or steady jobs and things like that. That's just no, come on. It's not the TLC channel, people. So, anyway, yeah, so, I was kind of afraid to just continue to search. I just didn't want to subject myself to any more negative stuff that was from biological family members. I didn't want to be disappointed. I didn't want to be put out either. I mean, what are they going to want from me if they're that messed up? What am I going to need to do for them now? Because I've had to do so much for my own. I'm like, I don't know. So, anyway, so when I was taken back with my mother to Vegas, she was remarried. And, she was married for the first time because her and my father never got legally married. So when she met my little sister's father, they got married. And he also worked in the casinos too. And so, it's a lot, it's a lot. So I'm gonna leave off right there. But I do want to back up a little bit when I come back and talk to you guys about when my mother, before I went for that 18 months with my father, I want to talk to you guys about my mother when she worked at the Las Vegas Club, and as I said, she worked in some of the casinos. I want to talk to you about how when she decided that she was no longer going to work, she's like, forget it. If we have to starve, we have to starve. I'm not working anymore, because she was a single mom, right? So she was working in the casinos, and she put me in a daycare, and how that ended up being an abusive place, and she jumped over the counter and beat the hell out of the women there because I had a mark on my face when she came and picked me up, and she claims it was an adult handprint. Okay, so that's one time. So then she had me go to another, and I'll talk about this in detail. She had me go to a woman's house that she knew, and this woman did not have any children, and I was being babysat by this woman, and she seemed to be a decent lady and everything. I mean, I remember the house being clean and nice. There wasn't anything bad going on there, but she did have a younger brother, a teenage brother that had a very, very good best friend that would hang out all the time. When this woman would go to the store, they would always offer to play games and shit with me, right? Well, I'm going to warn you when I come on for the next episode. If you're squeamish about sexual abuse and child molestation, I am going to talk about it. And I'm going to talk about it fairly in detail. So if you don't want to know about that, I'm telling you now, I'm going to be talking about that. Another home. It was a family home. A married couple with children. Seemed to be just the perfect, normal, average home. She tried it there. Okay, well, the other two places didn't work out. I gotta, get some daycare for my child. So this is a family, not too far from where our home was. And we'll try this out. Well, that family had as I said, they had kids. Now you gotta remember, it was not over 4 years old for me, because at 4 years old, I went with the gypsies for 18 months, my gypsy family, and came back at the age of 6. So this happened as a 4-year-old, between 3 and 4. So this woman had a 13-year-old, she knew better, I was 4, a 13-year-old daughter that was molesting me. Again, let's go play games. Let's go play games in the room. Well, when my mother would leave, when she would drop me off, and I'd come back, they would I would throw a fit. I would fall out on the floor, scream and cry, kick and cry when I knew my mom was going to leave. I enjoyed my mother. I loved my mother at that point still. Everything was great. I didn't want to see my mom go to work. I would cry and cry. No, Mom, don't go. Well, things started getting bad there behind closed doors, and nobody knew what was going on in this little girl's room. And so they would, occupy me, get me all busy and everything, the family, and then my mom would sneak on out the door and go to work because I would throw a fit, oh, don't go. So my mom would slip on out the door. Well, every time she did that, it was freaking traumatizing, but she's thinking she's going to slip on out the door. She's got to get to work, right? She can't deal with this drama every time. And so, yeah, it ended up coming out. I don't remember how it came out, but I know that I don't know what made it come out. I don't know why I ended up telling what was the last straw or how or why, but I did end up telling my mom. And so, shit hit the fan. So, I will tell you guys in detail about what happened. Hold on just a second. And, this way, people can be aware, and they can watch, and they can look, and they can be aware of what the hell is going on. When your kids start acting a certain way, and when, kind of things to look for, and yeah, it happens in full families. Yeah, it happens with a woman that has no children and her little brother. Yeah, it happened at daycare. Got the shit slapped out of me by an adult, so, it happens, and it happens more than people know. And so, one more thing I wanted to back up about. I'm going to have to find out from my aunts with my grandmother in Chicago and going from Vegas about my step-grandfather and how much they do and don't want me to let out about the sexual abuse and how bad it was with the stepfather and my grandmother's daughters, my aunts. I need to respect that. It did happen, and it was horrible. It happened to some of the girls more than others, and some of the girls it didn't happen to at all. Okay, so the step grandfather that I know never did those kind of things to me, and I never seen him do those kind of things to me. But from what my cousins have told me, some of my older cousins, and what my aunts have told me, and my mother, yes, it did happen, to the point of rape and things like that. So it was pretty bad. Years later, my grandmother stayed with him. To make a really long story short, years later, my grandmother ends up putting 5 rounds in his stomach, and he lived. And also, my grandmother ended up dying from a bullet to the head. Now, my aunts believe that my step grandfather pulled the trigger and had something to do with it. He lived after those 5 rounds, obviously. But it's down that my grandmother on paper committed suicide and killed herself and shot herself in the head. So, yeah. Again, I'm going to talk about those things next time. That will be, so I've done the intro, so here's number 1, and that'll be number 2, I guess. So I promise you, it is not going to take as long as it did for me to get back on here. As I said, those acid burns and all this construction going on, and just everyday life period, going through drama with my older kids and stuff, just everyday life. It's been, I think, 5 weeks since, and I said I was going to try to do this once a week. So I am so sorry. It's not going to be as long. I'll be back out here doing this again. Hopefully no later than the end of next week. We'll be at this again, and I will be right here. Maybe I'll be poolside. Maybe the poolside will be decent enough for me to sit over there by the poolside and the pool shed and stuff. The pool house won't be completely done. We won't have like the plywood up and it all painted and stuff, but at least I can go over there poolside. I can hang out in the pool and do this next time. I'll sit in the pool on my damn floaty, and we'll just we'll do another She Is Me on my floaty. So anyway, you matter, I matter. Let's get it done. It is 5 o'clock somewhere, so cheers from the Gypsy Cove and my tiki bar. And I hope you guys have all somewhat enjoyed some of what I've told you, or taken something from what I have told you. And again, next time we get on here and talk, it's going to get down to some nitty-gritty stuff. So stay tuned. I appreciate you guys, and take care.